Charlie Munger says, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And I believe in aligning employees' incentives with my incentives as much as possible. And my incentive as an owner is to pay myself as little as possible and maximize my enterprise value. That's the business I wanted to build. Some people maybe just want cash flow, whatever, that's fine. So what I look for with employees was I want to pay you as little as possible and give you as much equity as possible. And it's a bit of arbitrage because we bootstrap. I could give larger equity grants than VC-backed businesses. And it was a signal for me. If someone's like, no, I only want high cash, I want equity. I actually don't want that person on my team then because they don't believe in what they're building and they want their money today. Like I want someone who's going to ride, with me.
Welcome to the Ecomm Breakthrough Podcast. Are you ready to unlock the full potential and growth in your business? You've already crossed 7 figures in sales, but the challenge is knowing how to take your business to the next level.
Welcome to the Ecomm Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hadley, where I interview the top business leaders in e-commerce. Past guests include Kevin King, Aaron Cordovez, and Michael E. Gerber, author of The E-Myth. Today, I am speaking with Ben Arneberg, and we're going to be talking about timeless business principles that allowed him to exit 3 different brands and how he's on a journey now where he doesn't even care about money because he is focused on the intrinsic value of what he's giving back to society. I think that's everything that we all want to strive to be as entrepreneurs, and he's going to show us how he's been able to achieve that in his life. This episode is brought to you by Ecomm Breakthrough, where I specialize in investing in and scaling 7-figure e-commerce brands to 8 figures and beyond. If you're an ambitious e-commerce entrepreneur looking for a coach or consultant who can help take your business to the next level, I bring hands-on experience, strategic insights, and the resources needed to fuel your growth. So if you or someone you know is ready to scale or looking for that coach or consultant or partner, reach out to me directly at josh@ecommbreakthrough.com. That's ecom with 2 M's, and let's turn your dreams into reality. Today, I am excited to introduce you all to Ben Arneberg. He began his career as a U.S. Air Force satellite engineer and member of the Air Force parachute team, where he learned how to take calculated risks that end in success. He is a serial entrepreneur with 3 exits under his belt. He's the founder of Pet Honesty, a consumer brand that is improving pet health. And he's also an investor passionate about disruptive technologies, education, and helping others find and live out their dreams. So with that introduction, welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks, Josh. It's great to be here.
Ben, I think we could probably spend the full episode talking about the U.S. Air Force and parachuting because that's a fascinating topic in and of itself. But I think the audience is going to be really interested to kind of get to know you. You've got 3 exits under your belt. Like you've been there, done that in the e-commerce space. So why don't you just bring everybody up to speed on what got you to where you are today? How did you exit those brands and what's your background?
Sure. Yeah. So I was in the Air Force for 9 years, 4 years at the academy where I was on the parachute team, and then 5 years of active duty. And I love the Air Force, very grateful for the experience. But my last few years in, I was really tired of the bureaucracy and not having autonomy over my life. And freedom is one of my highest core values. So I basically started researching what's the business I could do, on the side to kind of get ready for eventually transitioning out of the Air Force. I came across e-commerce, specifically selling on Amazon. And this was in maybe the glory days, some might say, of like 2015, 2016, and created a few brands in selling products on Amazon and branching out a little bit, doing a Kickstarter, something on our website. 2017 rolled around and got out of the Air Force, went a little bit crazy, started a few more businesses, to the point where in 2018, I found myself with actually 5 different businesses and a newborn child. My life was complete chaos. The businesses actually had grown top line, but bottom line was essentially non-existent. And it was a very scary year for me because I actually thought the whole thing was going to crumble and I was going to have to basically go get a job and give up on my dream of being an entrepreneur. This was, again, only less than a year after being out of the Air Force. So that brought a lot of soul searching. And I think, honestly, like developing some of these principles I'll be sharing today because I realized something had to change. And one of the big things I realized is I'd become my own worst enemy. At that point, I was shiny object syndrome and so excited about all these different possibilities and brands that I was spreading myself thin. And I wanted at that point to do one thing and one thing with excellence. And that's where I kind of started realizing the power of maniacal focus. So with that, ended up actually shutting two of the businesses down. One was a brand, one was an agency, and just realized, sunk costs, like, let's just kill these. I was able to get two of the businesses to a healthier spot, sold one in 2018 to an aggregator, another one in 2019 to Thrasio, which I'm sure many of the listeners are familiar with. Rest in peace, Thrasio. But with those exits, they're I think at 1.4, 1.8 million. I had a business partner on one, but that gave me enough cushion, was able to essentially take all that cash and reinvest it in the remaining business, which was Pet Honesty. And right from the start, when that business went live in 2018, I knew it was different from the others, which, by the way, I think is an interesting kind of side note. There was absolutely opportunity costs and the different options people have in creating brands. And Pet Honesty was definitely a great business to be in. Good timing, great gross margins, all the things. We can unpack that later if interested. But by having all of my focus on that business and giving myself time to think and learn, we also got very fortunate in timing. It took off like a rocket ship. And we basically went from 0 to 70 million in under 3 years. And as a part of that journey, I realized it was time to actually bring on a partner to help us take it to the next level. So I did end up selling the majority of it in 21 at a fantastic 9-figure exit for that. Decided to still roll a significant amount into the new business, but as a minority shareholder. And I did that. So in 2022, decided it was time to step down as CEO. Was pretty tired and burned out at that point from the pace, from starting in 2015 Air Force side businesses to then. And that's kind of kicked off a bit of a sabbatical and kind of inward journey, which probably is a whole other podcast episode.
I love it. So Ben, if I heard you correct, so you started Pet Honesty in 2018, and then you didn't sell it until 2021. And you said you sold it for a 9-figure valuation. So what was your revenue run rate at that point when you sold the business?
Yeah, we were around like the $70 million.
That's amazing. And what was it that kind of like catapulted you guys to 70 million, right? Like going from 0 to 70 million in 3 years is no small feat.
Yeah, look, I think definitely a level of humility here and recognizing there was a lot of circumstances that went our way. I mean, a global pandemic forcing everyone to shop online and everyone's thinking about pets and health. So that was a pretty incredible combination of factors. But I think also it was us, I think, starting to think about how to properly scale. And I think for me, the big unlock was going to this concept of who, not how, and really moving out of being the guy doing most things with a team of like assistants in the Philippines to being the guy hiring the best people on the planet for different functions and letting them run the business.
Very interesting. Okay. Let's dive down into this story a little bit further then. So walk me through, well, you mentioned that in 2018 when you started Pet Honesty that like you noticed that something was different compared to the other brands that you had previously worked on, exited. What was that difference and why was it different and how did you notice it?
Yeah. So one of the things I'll share, this is another principle I have, is if there's something I want to do in life, I find someone who's done that and I learn from them. And when I started Pet Honesty, I did have this sense that this was different, that this was going to be a significant brand. Kind of had this intuition like this is $1 billion brand. And with that, but what led to that, even finding the opportunity in Pet, is I was hungry for creating a bigger business. And when I looked at people who had successfully done that, who had quote unquote done what I wanted to do and had what's called like 9-figure exits, because I thought that'd be a really fun goal to shoot for, I realized there were certain characteristics of those businesses. So they typically had really great gross margins. They typically had really good lifetime value in the form of oftentimes a consumable repeat purchase product. And there's like a high emotional appeal to the products they were selling. So instead of selling like a spatula, I had a kitchen products brand, selling something that helps your dog's health, there's like this high, motivation for the buyer to want that. And I started noticing that pattern in a lot of the brands that were fetching the biggest valuations. So that was a big, I think, realization for me to realize I'm building, a kitchen products brand. It was called Willow and Everett. And it was a great little brand, and I actually loved it. I was a passionate tea and coffee user. But when I launched Pet Honesty, I knew it had kind of checked these boxes of us just frankly being a superior business model. Everything has trade-offs, of course. So oftentimes these superior business model companies are going to have a lot more competition. But what's interesting is Pet Honesty was literally 100 times more valuable than the kitchen products brand. My exit between the two was a 2-year difference. Sold the kitchen products brand in 2019, Pet Honesty in 2021. I wasn't a 100x better entrepreneur, right? I didn't have 100x better strategy. It was literally the opportunity itself. So that was an important lesson for me is as I'm building these other brands, it was hard to initially leave them to go to Pet Honesty, but it's one of these, I think, almost like cognitive biases that we have is we don't fully understand opportunity cost. And I could have worked my ass off and been the best in the world at building a kitchen products brand. Even at the best in the world, and maybe would have been 10x bigger. So I think that's like an interesting lesson for me is the opportunity itself can oftentimes be the most important thing.
I love that. I think that resonates a lot. And I think that, it's like, what vehicle are you taking, right? Because certain vehicles can only go so far. And so are you truly on a rocket ship, or are you, on your bicycle, right? And hoping that you can get to that 100 to the moon in a bicycle. Don't think that's necessarily going to be able to happen. And so I think that vehicle does make a big difference. As you mentioned, like you weren't 100x better, but we're able to have 100x better valuation. So what is your advice and recommendations then for somebody that's hearing you speak right now and they're like, crap, I don't know if I'm in the right vehicle, or like, what do I do with my existing brand? Because that's who's listening to this, are existing brand owners. So what's your recommendation to them? And also, like, if they do want a 9-figure billion-dollar valuation type brand, like, what do they do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first question I would ask is, what do they actually want? I kind of realized there's this kind of huge irony of life of we spend our entire lives living and no time thinking about how we want our life to look. Like we spend more time on the car we drive or the house we live in than actually thinking about how to design our lives. So I think what was helpful for me and what I maybe tell listeners is just get really clear on what you want. Like, what do you want for your life? And this is a whole separate conversation. I think there's ways to do that come from maybe connecting to what like you truly intrinsically want versus what maybe the ego wants from a place of limitation. And I'll say it for myself, like for me looking back, going for a big exit, I'm so glad I did it, but bigger doesn't always mean better. It doesn't always mean happier or whatever. So I would just ask people first and foremost, like, what do you actually want? And let's say, okay, they want to have something that can, have a larger financial impact on them. Then I think it'd be getting really honest about where they're at right now in the business they're in. And do they think their current business has the potential to get to the valuation they want to hit? And the best way to do that is to look at markers of what have other businesses in their industry sold for and what are the characteristics of that. And if they find that, like, whatever they're doing doesn't have a high potential, then I think it's time to possibly consider starting something else with what they've done. So a principle I love is so in the book Essentialism, he talks about having a season of exploration and then exploitation. So while, yes, my life was chaotic in 2017 with 5 different businesses, it actually brought a level of healthy exploration. And then when I found the one that I knew was better, I could fully exploit it. So for some listeners here, if they're in an inferior business model that they think has a low probability of getting to the financial place they want, what would it look like to explore with another business or two, start it again, and they could, sell the current one, they could automate it, whatever. So that's one. I think if they feel like their current business and industry has the potential, and again, they're looking at other examples of this, then, I've said this, but I'm a huge believer of when there's something I want to do, find someone who's done it and learn from them. And that typically can come from a book or a course. I find that when building a business, the best information is in the minds of those who are actively doing it, like the operators. And there's ways that I found effective to create an advisory board. That's something I did at Pet Honesty that was massively helpful. I created advisors who had done what I wanted to do. And they helped me think through the right strategy and have the blueprint to basically build the business that I wanted.
Love that. Okay, so let's double down on that. So let's go all the way back to 2018. You identify Pet Honesty as like, all right, here's the rocket ship that I want to be on. Great opportunity. Did you just start it by yourself, or did you bring on team members? Who was it that you started it with? And maybe walk me through, like, what did 2018 look like? What did 2019 look like for this brand? And walk me through kind of like that evolution. When did you bring on this advisory board and all of that?
Yeah, so starting Pet Honesty, it was one of like a few different brands. So in the beginning, it wasn't that special in how we started it. I did have one full-time employee, Sean, who was on our kitchen products brand. He was helping with Pet Honesty, and then my now ex-wife, but we're on great terms, Camille, helped me start it as well. And she was great at branding and kind of like intuiting what the customer would want from a look and feel perspective. So they were both there on the ground floor. And then we had a team of, VAs, essentially a few in the US, some in the Philippines, that were helping just with like logistics, customer service, that sort of thing. But the first year, I could already tell it had potential. Maybe within a few months, it was at $1 million run rate. And right around that time, as we're now turning into 2019, that's when I finally started getting smarter. Like the expression, work smart, not hard. Work smart and hard. But and that's when I'm trying to think timing wise, what was happening. I think I was starting to, the saying like your network is your net worth. And I was starting to seek out those who were building businesses like I wanted to build. So 8 and 9 figures, and getting to know, especially some people around Austin who were building consumer brands worth 8 or 9 figures, seeing how they thought, what they were doing. And I started realizing I love finding best practices. I believe tech startups hold a lot of the best practices for how to build companies because they are in the most competitive, highest enterprise value creating space. So as I studied how tech companies were built, found a few books that were helpful, I started realizing, okay, common practice is to have an advisory board. Common practice is to have actually an equity pool and finding top talent and compensating them with equity. And that's right around that time I basically started to embark on that. So let me think about initial advisors. Let me start to hire. I did hire one other employee to kind of lead like our website without equity. But then in 2019 is when I went after a few hires who were very talented, but I need to start thinking about compensation. So I can go deeper into that, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, no. Okay. I love this. So it's kind of like 2018, you saw it had $1 million run rate pretty quickly. And then 2019 is when you feel like, okay, now it's time to go do what the tech startups are doing and follow more of their processes. I need an advisory board and I need to have an equity pool where I can bring on the best talent. Am I correct?
Yes. And in 2019, we did $6 million revenue. So I could already tell like, okay, this thing's got
Okay. So 2019, you're doing $6 million in revenue. What's your EBITDA at that point?
So interestingly, I chose to keep EBITDA very low. It fluctuated year to year from like 0 to 1 or 2 million. This is maybe, not great hygiene, but I didn't care as much about it because I wanted to aggressively reinvest every dollar back in the business.
Okay. Interesting. So how did you have the funds then? And so this is what we'll dive into then of like bringing on people, because I'm sure a lot of these people are going to be 6-figure plus salaries if you're bringing on A-level talent. So the question is, all right, well, if you're reinvesting all of your money back into inventory and advertising in your business, then where's the money to fund these people that you're bringing in?
Yeah, and that's always the tension for the small businesses. So I'll say for Pet Honesty, I was fortunate in that I was able to put about $1 million of my own money into it because of the prior exits. So that definitely gave it a good starting point. It did grow so fast and we launched so many products that cash was always tight. There was oftentimes weeks where we had like 5 weeks projected cash left. And I would do aggressive things like getting as many credit cards as possible. It was very difficult to get loans. It took me like 2 years to get one. I will say though, from a business model perspective, cash flow was superior for this versus the other ones, right? Because instead of importing from China with, all that time in the water, here I can make in the US, I can have much better terms with the manufacturer.
Like what? What were your terms?
I mean, it varied, but net 30, net 60, minimal percentage down. So I just had more, less working capital requirements than the previous business.
Love it. Okay. So you've got that going for you. How are you still able to afford the top talent then, would be my question.
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think how to I'm trying to think how my story in the, landscape then versus today. And today, it's shifted, right? And I helped create a brand last year that we're launching. And in a lot of ways, it feels more competitive, but there's always opportunity. But I think back, and this applies for anyone, we had profitable products, and I intentionally decided to invest some of the profits we're making into very talented team members, and then the rest into the necessary marketing to grow the business. I would say that I'm always looking for the highest leverage ways to grow the business. So for us, in our specific brand, it was launching more products. The cost to launch a product was very inexpensive versus the expected value was incredibly high. Now we were, I'd say an Amazon marketplace first brand that also figured out D2C, but launching a lot of products on marketplaces generates a lot of profit. If you're more of a D2C first brand, that might not work as well. You can do cross sells and stuff, but there's not the organic traffic to take advantage of. So I would say by us having a very aggressive product launch strategy, it allowed us to quickly scale, gross profit, and then reinvest a lot of that into talent and some into marketing.
Okay. I love it. And I want to continue to go down this rabbit hole because I feel like this is the genesis of what actually got you to 70 million, right? It's having an advisory board and it's having really wicked smart people on your team, right? It's the who, not how. So Ben, let's talk maybe more about that. Who are the key hires that you hired in 2019 and why? Who did you hire first and why?
Yeah. And maybe if I can just zoom out really quick to help the listeners, because I think what I want to do, a lot of these, there's, tactic strategies that we do is important, but I'd also like people understand the timeless principles. And in the way I kind of see it is first is getting the vision of what you want to do. And I want to build, a 9-figure exitable brand in consumer. I just know that's possible. So once I think a person's clear on their vision and they believe it's possible, by the way, a lot of visions become self-fulfilling prophecies because if you fully believe it, imagine trying to sell an employee. Imagine me trying to sell an employee being I'm going to build a 7-figure kitchen brand versus, hey, we're going to build a $1 billion pet brand. You get way better talent and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So again, have the vision you believe in, but 2 is have the right strategy. Every single day, there's a million things you can do. There's an unlimited amount of things to do. So there's no difference between a billionaire and a homeless person as far as they all have 24 hours a day. But where is their time going? How are they spending that time? Are they working on the most important things, the 80-20, the one thing, right? We all know this. But how do you actually figure out what that is for your business? And that's where, for me, finding the right strategy comes down to finding the models worth emulating, right? Find someone who's done what I want to do and learn from them. That principle has driven most of my success. So for me, it was a combination of, gleaning from podcasts, again, brands that are most similar to mine, finding these advisors who had built brands very similar to the ones I wanted to build and literally building a detailed scorecard, bulleting out every aspect I wanted this advisor to embody, and then not resting until I found them. And then also studying other brands too that were in the marketplace and learning from some of our biggest competitors. Wow, they're launching a shit ton of products. It's generating a lot of money. I don't do that, right? So I'm constantly updating my strategy and priorities from the models I found to emulate.
Love it. Okay, so then that pulls the curtain back even further into the advisory board really is the genesis of a lot of this as well. So
yeah, right. Because I think right now if you're a listener, how do you know who to hire? How did I know who to hire? I had the kitchen products brand with 1 W-2 and a team of BAs. I didn't even know how company structures look. Honestly, I didn't even know you have operations and you have finance and product. I didn't even know what fucking org charts look. So for me, let me start with, let me find advisors who have built what I want to build, right? Before I even think about who to hire, let me just find someone who's done what I want to do. Cause like, that's the simplest thing I can do. Like, I know they've done what I want to do, and let me learn from them.
So how did you find them?
Yeah.
That's my question. And how many of them did you have? Yeah.
How do we find them? So this is like I use a hiring principle. We could talk more about hiring because there's a few best practices I found really helpful, but there's this concept of a scorecard. So, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, but like it's basically, distilling what I want in this person. So I literally wrote out, I wanted a few different advisors. So I made a few different scorecards, but I want one advisor who has built a consumer brand with a high margin consumable product to, a 9-figure exit. I want another one who's built a pet brand, with heavy online sales, 9-figure exit. So like, I try to get really specific on the advisor such that it matched what I was trying to do. Because the closer I could find someone who's done what I want to do, the higher probability that I could then emulate. So for me, it's online sales, a specific exit target, it's industry focus. And once I got very clear on that and wrote it down, to me, it's then kind of a scorched earth approach. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to find people. I find most people, you could find anyone on the street to give you advice. And this is the problem. People take advice from anyone. Like, that's so stupid in my opinion, because anyone can give you an opinion. Like, obviously the guy off the street versus the dude who's done exactly what they want to do, there's a massive opportunity cost in that advice. Most people settle for mediocrity with where they're getting their advice. So I always say be mindful of the opportunity cost. It's one of the most important things. There's unlimited information in the world today. So only get your information from the sources you think have the highest probability to help you, and then action against that. Because every hour of your execution, your team's execution, thousands of hours per year, is going against your information sources. So you better make sure your information sources are fantastic. So that's why take time to write a very specific scorecard and then go to your network to try to find these people. And that is a challenge. And that's where it's important to really build out a network. And sometimes it comes down to like one breadcrumb, right? Like when I moved to Austin, I got connected to a guy who's building a fantastic consumer brand. That was my one entry point. And he was very gracious and met with me, gave me great advice. And, I always tell people, like, if you get a meeting with someone who's kind of doing what you want to do, like, be super gracious with their, grateful for their time, like send a follow up, maybe a little gift, tell them how you're implementing it. And then, hey, who else can I talk to? So I think it's really trying to build your network. Also looking for super connectors is something I found helpful. So getting to know perhaps a lawyer or a banker who knows a lot of people in your industry. They want to help you out because they're hoping for more business eventually, but that has been another helpful technique. Like 2 of my 4 advisors came from a banker who is a super connector. And they're highly motivated to get help because they want your business one day, whether that's on the personal side or corporate. But it's just being ruthless with like finding the person via your network and developing a network. There's masterminds you can join. Like I ended up joining YPO, there's EO, all these different things.
Yeah.
And the mechanics that I would share, there's something called the FAST agreement. So if your listeners just Google FAST agreement, and I could probably put it in the link. The FAST agreement I found incredibly helpful for basically saying it's a structure, it's a contract on how to work with your advisor. Very simple. It basically says for this stage company, this much bandwidth from the advisor equals this much equity. So you end up giving your advisors like 0.2 to 0.8% equity. But again, how do you even know what an appropriate equity pool is? How do you know what best practice is? Find the people who have done it. They built a 9-figure exit company. They've probably been through this. So you can learn that from your advisor. So they help me understand, hey, if you're building a business like this, you probably want to have 10% of your company set aside for your management team / advisors. And that's what I do.
Love it. Okay, perfect. So let's then dive into, so you had some really good advisors that joined you on the board. You then were giving up some equity to have them on your advisory board, and then you're going to go attract some talent. So let's dive into those hiring strategies of how do you identify A-level talent, and were you paying them above market wages, below market wages, but with equity? So talk to me more about that.
Yeah, great question. So for hiring, I'm a sucker for best practices. I found this book called The Who Method on Hiring that I think is the best practice on hiring. They interviewed Fortune 500 CEOs and billionaires, and it just works. It talks all about how to source your talent, how to vet your talent. I literally just copied their method because it's that fantastic. I'd rather not reinvent the wheel. Sure, I modified it a bit, used some different assessment tools that I liked, put our own cultural spin on it over time. But before using that method versus using it, it increased my accuracy, triple probably, just absolutely essential. And what I started realizing is, as the CEO, if my top priority is talent, I need to be spending the majority of my time on this. So I would start doing my own outreach, trying to find people to source, in addition to putting up job postings. But frankly, the best talent oftentimes is not looking for jobs. They're gainfully employed. So poaching became the source of, I would say, our best talent, actually. And oftentimes that comes from your network. Again, the Who book on hiring actually talks about this. So just follow the best practice. But yeah, when I thought about top talent, then Charlie Munger says, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And I believe in aligning employees' incentives with my incentives as much as possible. And my incentive as an owner is to pay myself as little as possible and maximize my enterprise value. That's the business I wanted to build. Some people maybe just want cash flow, whatever, that's fine. So what I look for with employees was, I want to pay you as little as possible and give you as much equity as possible. And it's a bit of arbitrage because we bootstrap. I could give larger equity grants than VC-backed businesses. And it was a signal for me. If someone's like, no, I only want high cash, I want equity, I actually don't want that person on my team then, because they don't believe in what they're building and they want their money today. Like, I want someone who's going to ride, with me. So that's the approach I took. Again, not right for every business. Depends what you're trying to build, but that's what I prefer to do.
Love it. Okay. So you're paying technically below market average probably, but incentivizing people with equity, and those are the people that you wanted. Let's talk more about the poaching aspect though. It is a big component of that Who book, which is like your best candidates are going to come from referrals from your network. So talk to me about, like, how would you approach poaching other candidates? Was it primarily through LinkedIn? Because again, if you're getting contacts, like, these are just like cold introductions, relatively warm, of people. Talk to me more about like what that looked like and how you were doing that. Because you said it right. Like, as the CEO, you quickly learned that, like, the number one thing I need to do with my time is hire the best people, right? So what were you doing, like, on a day-to-day basis? Walk us through what that actually looks like to poach good talent.
Yeah, this is it's an incredibly important topic that's very difficult. I will also mention to listeners, there's a book called High Growth Handbook that is fantastic. It's written by a Silicon Valley CEO entrepreneur. And there's a few excerpts on how to hire and and it's just fucking amazing. So I highly recommend buying that book and reading a few chapters on hiring in addition to Who. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so much of success, I think, in business does come down to the network. Like, some of my best hires as we got underway, like an advisor knew someone, right? Or the banker, whatever, like, built a peer in building a business. So that does become vitally important. So I think for listeners thinking about, could you spend a few hours a week actually improving your network and doing so in a non-transactional, loving way, I think it's important too. Like, always looking to give first, but that's important. The poaching thing, here's the thing. If again, like, this came down to me logically proving to myself the highest use of my time is finding top talent. I'm going to bucket off X percentage of my time a week on this. I just try everything. Like, sometimes you just brute force this shit. You try to work smart and hard, but sometimes you just got to, like, work hard until something works. And there's a bit of like a cold start problem where it's like my first couple hires were the hardest because I didn't have a good network. I had a 7-figure brand. I'm like selling hopes and dreams. It was easier a year later when we're at a 30 million run rate. I have great advisors. Like, it's a flywheel, right? But in the beginning, and I guess that's where many listeners are, it's really hard. And that's okay. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. So like, I'll share some things I did. I really wanted an amazing growth marketer. So I would literally go on LinkedIn. And I had this hypothesis that someone with a consulting background from like a top consulting agency was just whip smart and figure out most problems. So I was literally on LinkedIn searching for ex-consultants with growth marketing in their title. This is not a joke. And literally like just cold messaging people.
Love it.
Get coffee, want to meet up. Ended up getting coffee with a guy here in Austin, and he was our 5th employee, and just incredible. Business wouldn't have succeeded without, but because he could just learn any area through it. That was amazing. I realized early on from some of these best practices, I needed an incredible executive assistant, jack of all trades, who worked HR, different functions. And I made the posts, I'm posting all the Indeed, all that shit. But then I'm like going to my network. And I think at this point I was in a mastermind called E-commerce Fuel. And I'm just like, guys, like, anyone know a great EA? And this dude, Arenberg, great guys. I think my friend, Natalie, is like looking for a new job. And she ended up being 10 times better than any candidate in the funnel. And it just came from me being so like just telling everyone I knew, do you know this person? Do you know this person? Putting together a quick paragraph and blasting out to my network while trying all the job boards. While, by the way, later I would hire recruiters, because sometimes recruiters are able to find these people. But for me, it's just being ruthless, like just trying everything to find this person, having such a high bar, not accepting anyone off the street.
Yeah, Ben, I absolutely love that. And I love you kind of pulling back the curtain, because like you did everything, right? It wasn't a one size fits all. It's like, hey, everybody we hired came from a job post on LinkedIn. Go put your job post on LinkedIn and they're going to all apply, right? Like that's not what it's about. I love that like every person that you brought onto your team, and it's been the same way for myself, is like they've all had their unique entry points into the business. And there is no one size fits all, but it does mean that like you have to actively be pursuing these people. You got to be putting it out into the world that like, I'm looking for this person, right? And sometimes, I guess here would be my follow-up question to you, because I've had this problem. Sometimes I put it out into the world and it's like crickets. It's like, hey, I'm looking for this. And then like, it's like, wait, did my post get any traction? Like, did that happen to you?
I think, let me think, where I got no feedback for a role. Yeah, I think if that happens, it's a function of, is the role not exciting enough for the opportunity? That's definitely happened, I'd say, with like the kitchen products brand. And I was like, why is no one wanting this? But if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the employer, like they want an exciting opportunity with something they're passionate about that has like upside. So I think there's a way to like tweak it to get that. But I think another problem I had that maybe resonates with listeners is sometimes I didn't know what good looked like. Like I knew I needed a growth marketer to figure out our D2C. Our D2C was $1 million a year. I'm like, this should be way bigger. We should be able to go to 10 million a year. So I did all the advice. I made a scorecard, blah, blah, blah. Like, how do I know what a good growth marketer looks like? And that's where this high growth handbook talks about, like, we'll go find amazing growth marketers so you know what good looks like. We'll just give you advice. They're probably not for hire, but learn from them and they can help you know what like levers to look for. And I will say that role was one where I had challenge finding candidates, because I think growth marketing is like one of the hardest in like e-commerce, like it's the hardest role to fill. And the best talent is not looking for jobs. Oftentimes they're doing their own thing. So just to do a posting, like I was just getting mediocre talent back. So that is one where I did have to engage a recruiter and hit my network pretty hard. Yeah.
Did you find people through a recruiter then?
I have, yeah. And honestly, I like to do it in parallel, right? So for my VP of Ops, I had a really strong referral from someone, but I didn't know. I never hired a VP of Ops before, so like, is he good or not? So like, I'm gonna fucking run the full process in parallel. So I had a recruiter spin up a bunch of candidates. By the way, talking to candidates also helped me understand what to look for, especially if I'm talking to good ones. I ended up going with referral, but it was. I like to do things in parallel. Growth marketer, opposite happened, where I had a few referrals coming in, engage a recruiter. The recruiter's candidate was actually better. And then one more anecdote that I think is like interesting, maybe gets juices flowing. So I wanted someone eventually to lead one of our biggest marketplaces, which was Chewy. So as a team, we went out to Chewy headquarters a few times. And before going, this is where scrappiness comes in. I just LinkedIn blasted like 20 Chewy employees. I'm like, hey, we're going to be at headquarters. Would you want to get coffee? And like, why not? Like, let me just learn. And a few of them were willing to, met up. And one of them, hit it off really well with, and just started planting the seeds. Like, hey, if you're ever interested in leaving, you want to work for a brand, this could be a good opportunity. And I think that's where the power of the CEO is, like trying to be a fantastic salesman. So we kept in touch, and 6 months later, he ended up quitting Chewy to join us, and he was one of the best hires we made. But again, like, it just took me doing something that seemed kind of stupid. Like, I'm going to cold message a bunch of Chewy people. But I guess that's 2 people from cold LinkedIn messages. It works. And by the way, a lot of that comes down to, like, so many people get blasted with LinkedIn. So how do you make it compelling, right? How does your first sentence make them excited to open the message?
I love that. And I think, like, you know, to your point, like when I say like, hey, some of my posts have like fallen on deaf ears. Maybe is it a messaging problem, right? It's like, maybe tweak the message, right? What is that first sentence? How am I attracting people? Like, is it actually exciting enough? So I love that. And I think it's a constant game of iteration as well, right? You got to put it out there. You're like, this works, this doesn't work. And just grow and pivot as you go through that process. So I love to hear that kind of iterative process. It wasn't like you went out and hired a whole management team in 3 months, and then 3 months later, like, you guys were off to the races. It sounds like you added one puzzle piece at a time over various stages. Is that true?
Yeah, that's so true. And one of the things that maybe if, you know, I mentioned, I'm kind of like I'm curious about enduring principles that lead to success. And one of the things I've been, you know, thinking about is, you're absolutely right, iteration is key. So I think for any listener today, it's like, to get from where you are to where you want to go, I believe it requires action on the right things, but also learning is so important, and allowing for iterations to take place as you're assimilating new information from mentors, books, etc., but executing on the right priorities. And for me, honestly, that came down to a few core habits. Like, every single day, I set aside at least 20 minutes to learn about the most relevant topic for my business. I call this a just-in-time learning approach versus a lot of people just read like, oh, that's interesting, hopefully I need it one day. No. Learn about the most important area of your business, and that learning will compound. So by setting aside 20 minutes every day at a minimum, I was burning through this book, whatever, and taking notes and like trying to summarize it to then force it into my business. But that was a complete game changer. Like that, the books, besides advisors, are one of the greatest source of knowledge. The other piece, though, that helped me a lot, was another core habit, was actually setting aside time every week to think, to take 1 to 2 hours uninterrupted time. There's this guy, Keith Cunningham, who I learned this from. But what happens in thinking time is you pose a powerful question, and it takes a few iterations to find the right question. But when you have the right question, what comes out of you is pure magic, because your subconscious has so much wisdom that you're pulling out in this time. And really, thinking time is a time to assimilate all the learning you're having and solve the biggest problems in the business. So a lot of times, and here's like a great irony is, you know, we spend 50 hours a week working, no time thinking about how to spend that time. So oftentimes in thinking time, I would say, what should I be thinking about? What's the unasked question? Okay, where should I be spending my time? What's the highest point of leverage? Okay, hire. And I've looked back at my notebooks, like, your mind knows where it needs to go, wants to focus on. But I think that repeated, you know, consistency of having that dedicated time to thinking about the biggest priorities and solve the biggest problems is what led me to a lot of the strategies, et cetera, that I'm talking about. Because, by the way, the strategies I'm sharing aren't one size fits all. You will develop your own strategies for your business, but I find thinking time the best way to tease that out.
So, Ben, true or false here? Do you feel like it's better for an entrepreneur to, or especially in our space, lots of entrepreneurs have multiple brands that they are running, right? They're like, oh, I started this brand, then I started this brand, I had this idea, so I started this brand, this looked like a good opportunity, so I've got multiple brands. Is it better to have multiple brands, or is it better to go all in on one, especially as you're talking about like setting aside time to do deep work and talk about strategies? Give me your feedback based off of running multiple brands all at the same time. And then basically you kind of honed in on one. Give me the pros and cons. And if you were to go back and do it again, what's the right approach for entrepreneurs to take?
Yeah, I don't think there's a right approach. I think it all depends on their goals and what they want. I think if someone is trying to maximize time freedom and financial outcome, there's no question one brand is the best, because maniacal focus it always wins. I've never seen it not. If you're someone who craves variety and wants to spin a lot of plates and loves stress, like, cool. Like I was there for a few years, honestly. And then sometimes that leads to like the exploration like we talked about. So I'll say for myself, I do prefer, if I'm going to be in builder or CEO mode, having one thing to go deep on. That absolutely rings true. And the other though, principle I'm realizing is I made this transition from exploring to exploiting and having chaos, a bunch of small brands. So one big brand is the bigger transition wasn't even me getting smarter on like advisors and hiring. It was actually leading myself, because as the CEO, I am always the constraint on the business's growth and success. It can only grow as much as I'm growing. And the biggest transition I made from that season of chaos to having the big winner was getting my own internal systems under wraps. So it was actually doing this morning routine, consistently reading every single day and learning every single day, thinking 1 to 2 times a week without fail. That is what, having dedicated deep work on my top priorities. Before that, I didn't do that. I was just like ping, 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 reactive. So that was by far the biggest shift. And I will never again build something without having dedicated learning time, dedicated deep work time, and thinking time. And by the way, doing that for me basically makes it impossible to have multiple things, because I'm a firm believer in, by definition, priority can really be like one thing, maybe at most 3. So how could I have 3? How could I have so many things going on and have to distill it to 3 goals for the week? That's not how I want to live. And I don't think it leads to success. So that would be my long answer.
Yeah, I agree with that statement there. I think that I call them shower ideas, right? Like your subconscious is going to work for you in the background. But if you have 3 different businesses, and then you have, let's say you've got 2 priorities for each of those businesses. Now you've got 6, right? So you've got 6 priorities now. What if you had 3 priorities for each business? Now you got 9. Your subconscious can't go deep onto any of those 1 priorities because you're so scattered and you're too focused. And I've heard this time and time again as I've even coached and mentored other entrepreneurs. It's like, well, I've got this brand and I'm trying to do this over here. And I've got this brand, I'm trying to do that over there. And I'm like, look, if you just went all in on one of these brands and you tried to go all in on influencer marketing for this one brand, I know you're going to crush it. But instead, you're going at it with 33% of your energy over here, 33% over there, and you're getting mediocre results. And neither brand is taking off like a rocket ship, because like you're just spread too thin. And I love your comment there of like the business is only going to grow as far as you are developing as a leader.
Yeah.
And it's your mindset. Like you are the constraint of the business. Your limiting beliefs are the constraint of the business. Your time to do deep research and deep work on the business and set the correct strategies is truly the constraint. And I think way too many people skip over that and they stay in the place of like level of comfort that they know, which is like, I can find a bunch of different small product ideas and launch those and spin them into cash real quick. But like on the other side of the hard concrete wall that you got to jump over, which is deep work, conquering really difficult challenges, whether it's retail distribution or brand new business models or whatever it is, it's by getting beyond that the 10x, the 100x valuations happen.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Ben, as we start to wrap things up, is there anything about your journey that you want to share with the listeners that we haven't yet touched on?
I think the last thing I'll say is, again, to reiterate, just get really clear on what you want and make sure it comes from a good place. Make sure that what you want isn't trying to compensate for some limiting belief or negativity. Like if I get X, then I'll be happy. Like make sure it's coming from a pure place that feels aligned with your values and what you want for your overall life. And then once you get clear on that, get really clear and specific, because everything you do is a multiplier after your vision. So just get incredibly clear on what it is you actually want.
Love that. Great words of wisdom there. Ben, as we wrap things up, I love to leave the audience with 3 actionable takeaways from every episode. Here are the 3 actionable takeaways that I noted. You let me know if I'm missing something. Action item number 1 piggybacks off of exactly what you just capped off with saying. It's like, it's all about your vision and the goals that you have. And again, reiterating the fact that like your business will only grow to the level of growth that you are experiencing as a leader. You are the constraint of the business. You are the one who's dictating, do you want this to be a $10 million cash flow business? Or do you want this to be a $100 million cash flowing business? Or do you want this to have $100 billion or a $1 billion or a $100 billion valuation one day, right? All of those things are possible, but you do have to make the decision. And I do think that there are a lot of people, and even myself at times, like a lot of us shirk away from that. It's like, I don't know, let's just see. I want it to grow as big as it possibly can. And it's like, well, if you do want that, there are certain things that need to be done now. And you talked about that, right? Which is going and getting the advice of mentors that have been there, done that. If you want a $100 million brand, go talk to the people that have already done that. Then they'll show you the playbook. But then you can get your mind sold on that. Then you can go poach, and then you can go sell talent to come join your team. So number 1, create that vision for your life. And Ben, maybe we'll talk about this at the end, but you're talking about how to take traction, implement it into the business. Lots of people are running EOS, but I think that vision aspect, can you take that same traction playbook and implement it into your own personal life to say, this is the end goal. When I'm 80 years old, I want to be able to say this, and then backwards plan your life. Because when you're able to do that, you bring those decisions to today, and you'll start to make different decisions. What would your 80-year-old self want you to make? All right. Action item number 2 is we're going to be talking about creating the right strategy. Okay. So whatever your goal is, go find the right people that have been there, done that. I love your idea of going out and finding advisors. Okay. And there are so many out there. So, but you have to go find them, right? It's not easy. There's no job board that says like, I'm an advisor, I would love to be on somebody's advisory board. You have to do a lot of networking to find these people. However, go find them. And when you find them, you're going to be able to kind of get the business model from them and say like, all right, how do I bring on people? And then you're able to tap into their network as well. But it's first, you've got to have the right strategy. And part of that strategy is first, are you in the right vehicle that could actually utilize that strategy? So it's a combination of both there. But I think having mentors that can say, hey, you want a $100 billion brand or a $100 million brand? It ain't going to be in this vehicle. Like, and having maybe that reality check is what you need. So that's action item number 2. Action item number 3 is being able to prioritize the one thing. Okay. So can you really focus on like, what is my one big growth lever for this business? Right. And we talked about like, that means probably not having multiple businesses. It means going all in, getting your big win, and focusing, what is the one thing that I can do that will have exponential results? And Alex Hormozy talks about this really well. He says business strategy is nothing more than having unlimited possibilities, okay, but with finite resources. And you've got to be able to make the call of like, I could do anything today, but what is the one thing that if I do this will actually grow above all else, all the other things, tasks, activities that I could do in the business? This is what will reap the most rewards in the future. Ben, anything else that you feel like I missed here?
That's beautiful. And I think what I would maybe tell listeners is it's one thing to know what to do, it's another thing to do it. And I would say knowledge that doesn't, infiltrate the physical world in some way is worthless. And I believe all this needs to be encapsulated in the right habits. We always fall to the level of our habits and our systems. So what I would tell listeners is just make sure you have the right habits in place. Because in my opinion, it's the most important thing. And there's different ways to get that, atomic habits, etc. I'm actually percolating. I told you on this like idea for a program that helps with this. But basically, if you are setting your priorities daily, weekly, monthly, if you're every day carving out deep work to work on said priorities, you're learning every day, like we've talked about, and then you're setting aside 1 to 2 times a week to think. I believe success is inevitable. Like that's it. It's like that. It's actually that simple, but because of compounding, which is the eighth wonder of the world, we typically don't understand it as humans because it's geometric. Compounding applies not just to money, but it applies to what we're talking about here. But that's it. But most people, from my experience, don't have the discipline to every day set aside 2 hours when after work, to set aside, time every week to plan daily priorities, to learn every day. It's very simple. It's not easy, but it's incredibly simple. And if you just do those things, and again, this is the shift I made from chaos to success, was implementing these core habits. It just becomes inevitable because you'll figure it out. And every listener here is smart enough, but they need the right habits to allow it to compound.
Love it. Really well said. All right, Ben, final 3 questions. What's been the most influential book that you've read and why?
Yeah, there's a bunch that come to mind, but I was paging through The One Thing again, and I'll say that right now because it's so simple yet powerful. I think in an ever increasingly complex world, simplicity is incredible. And yeah, so I would tell listeners, like, if you haven't read it, read it. And if you have read it again, but do it with notes. Do the hard thing and actually handwrite notes. And when you're done handwriting your notes, type it up. Every time I do this, it completely changes my life. So I'd highly recommend taking notes for The One Thing, because if you actually implement it, I think it's the highest leverage book I've experienced.
Yeah. Wonderful advice. That's a great book as well. All right. Question number 2. What's your favorite AI tool or chat GPT prompt that you've been using?
Right now so I'm still a little old school and believing in the power of my mind and do a lot of journaling and thinking time, but obviously AI is incredible. So there's a tool called Untold. It's a voice journal. And typically I'm like, whatever on voice journals, but you can speak 6 times faster than you can handwrite and 3 times faster than you can type. This is N of 1, test on myself, but you can transmit a lot more information via the voice. In this app, now for me, acts like a therapist, in some ways like a coach. It asks you questions back based on what you're saying. So for me, it's been an incredible way to just dump what's on my mind, being totally honest about where I'm at. I think honesty is really important in life and business. And I get massive clarity from what comes out of like a 10-minute voice journaling session. So that one's been really helpful for me.
What app is that? Did you say?
Untold.
Untold.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love that. All right. Final question here. So who is somebody that you've come across in the e-com space that's impressed you lately? Maybe it's a contractor who's crushed it on PPC ads, logistics, redesigned a storefront. Anybody that stood out to you recently?
I'm not super in the weeds with the couple of businesses I'm involved with, so I will say no, but instead I'll share maybe a principle I found. I think conferences, et cetera, are fine. I have a firm belief that in the most important pieces of business in e-commerce, which I think is marketing, the best talent are the operators that I can trade notes with that maybe aren't going to be at Prosper or other shows. So one thing I found very helpful is if I'm able to connect with someone I think is a top talent, I will fly out and meet with them in person. They're typically in New York or LA. That's where I find the best growth marketing talent today. Sure, there's exceptions, but I have found massive value from taking the time to meet in person with these top talented people. They'll tell me all the tools they're using. They'll give me other people to meet with, but that is a complete game changer. So I prefer to do that.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Ben, this has been a great episode. Thanks so much for your time. If people want to follow you in your journey, they want to see what you're up to in your sabbatical and your new endeavors, where's the best people can follow you at?
Yeah, I would say you could go to LinkedIn, Ben Arneberg, or Instagram, Ben Arneberg. I might start creating more content at some point. So I can give me a follow request and I might start sharing. And if people have questions, happy to help as well. So just being
awesome. Ben, thanks again for your time today.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you for listening. Visit EcommBreakthrough.com for more information. If you've enjoyed today's episode, the best way you can show your appreciation is by clicking the subscribe button and quickly leaving a review. See you again next time.